All right, let's dive into business news and global trends today. It's a wild mix. We've got election surprises, market jitters, clean energy breakthroughs, and a peek into India's economic landscape. Buckle up, folks.
It really is amazing, isn't it, how everything's connected. Politics, finance, tech, all weaving together in this global business tapestry.
Okay, let's start with the big news. Trump's back in the White House,
Yeah.
a non-consecutive two-term presidency,
hmm
not something you see every day, and the impact on global business could be huge. What do you think?
Well, this victory, nobody expected it. It's shaking up international relations. Everyone's wondering, what will Trump's policies mean for global trade? Especially tech and auto. Those industries are on edge, for sure.
And it's not just businesses, right? China's watching this U.S. power shift very closely. There's talk of trade tensions, maybe even tariffs hitting Indian industries like
Right.
uh, auto, textiles, pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. India's right in the middle of this US-China rivalry. Investors looking at India, they need to consider how this global power struggle might play out.
So the U.S. election, it's not just about American politics. It has huge implications for global business, even down to specific sectors in India.
Absolutely. And while politics are shifting, the markets are, well, they're doing their own unpredictable thing. Bitcoin, for example, it's hit a record high over $75,000, right in the middle of all this election craziness.
Wow. So is that just investors looking for safety during uncertain times? Or is something else going on? The Economic Times, they called this good news for nifty bulls. I'm not quite sure what that means, to be honest.
So Nifty Bulls, those are investors who are optimistic about the Indian stock market, specifically the Nifty 50 index. Bitcoin's surge, along with that positive feeling, it suggests confidence in economic growth, especially in emerging markets like India.
So even with the U.S. election shaking things up, there's a feeling that markets, especially in India, might weather the storm.
That seems to be the general feeling. And you see that resilience in India's own businesses, the way they're adapting and growing. The Economic Times highlighted the petrochemical sector projected to hit $1 trillion by 2040.
A trillion. Now that's a serious opportunity for investors. What's driving that kind of growth?
It's a few things. India's population is growing fast, and the middle class is rising. That means more demand for petrochemical products. Those are used in everything: packaging, construction, cars, textiles, you name it.
So a huge potential market and a rapidly growing industry. No wonder investors are paying attention.
And it's not just about demand within India. Global companies are seeing India's potential too. Skoda's CEO, for example, he specifically named India as a key growth market for the company.
That's a big vote of confidence. It sounds like India is really solidifying its place globally, not just as a consumer market, but as a manufacturing powerhouse too.
Precisely. And that brings us to another point, Color and CERN. Clean energy solutions. Did you see the article about that Danish Indian firm, the one turning agricultural waste into shipping fuel?
Yeah, that's amazing. They're tackling environmental concerns, A&D boosting farm yields. That's real innovation.
It is. This technology, it's a peek into a future where sustainability and economic growth go hand in hand. Of course, there are questions about whether it's really doable, on a large scale.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that. Can this technology really make a difference globally, or is it just a small step?
That's a crucial question, one we'll need to explore further. But it definitely shows that the clean energy sector is heating up, even as traditional energy companies adjust to this new reality.
It's almost like we're seeing a fundamental shift in how we think about energy, resources, and our impact on the planet. But before we get lost in the big picture, there was this one little detail that caught my eye. The CBSE, India's Central Board of Secondary Education. They're cracking down on dummy schools.
That's interesting. These dummy schools, they're basically a way for students to skip the normal education system, often to focus on competitive exams. This crackdown, it shows that genuine educational opportunities are important for India's future workforce.
It's a reminder that economic growth and innovation, they need a strong foundation of education and skills. It makes you wonder, how is India preparing its workforce for the challenges and opportunities in this rapidly changing global landscape?
That's a great question, and one we'll dive deeper into in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've got a political earthquake in the U.S., a Bitcoin boom, India's economic rise, and clean energy innovation. That's a lot to take in. But before we move on to part two, I want to ask you, what's the one thing that's really sticking with you so far?
For me, it's how interconnected everything is. We're seeing political decisions ripple through global markets, technology reshaping industries, and sustainability becoming central to innovation.
It is a complex and fascinating picture. But I think we're starting to see how the pieces fit together. We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into this ever-evolving world of business and global trends. Okay, we're back, ready to dig deeper into some of these global trends and how they might impact, your business decisions. This potential fallout from the U.S.-China rivalry, it's got me thinking. Concerns about higher tariffs on Indian industries, especially things like auto, textiles, pharmaceuticals, could be a real game changer.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. If you look back at Trump's first term, his America First approach, well, it did lead to some trade disputes, so there's a precedent there. And now, with China's economy facing its own issues, those tariffs, they could really escalate tensions.
So what's the game plan for a business in India, for example? How do they navigate this potential trade war minefield?
Well, being agile, being adaptable, that's key. Diversifying supply chains, looking at new markets, maybe even forming strategic partnerships. These could be crucial for, reducing those risks.
Interesting. So it's all about having a plan B or even a plan C ready to go. But amidst all this uncertainty, could there be opportunities for Indian businesses too?
Absolutely. India is in a unique position to benefit from this global shift. As companies look to move away from China, India becomes more attractive. For investment, for manufacturing, for talent, think of it like a positive ripple effect.
So not all doom and gloom then.
Not at all. It's about seeing both the challenges and the opportunities and making smart decisions based on that. Every crisis, it has the potential for innovation and growth.
Well said. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about this Bitcoin surge. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how cryptocurrency fits into all of this.
Cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, it's often seen as a hedge against traditional markets, against geopolitical uncertainty. When the world feels unstable, people look for safe havens. And for some investors, Bitcoin, with its limited supply and, decentralized nature, it fits that bill.
So like a digital gold rush.
You could say that, but it's more than that. Bitcoin's appeal, it goes beyond just storing value. It's not controlled by any government or financial institution because it's decentralized. That's appealing to those who distrust traditional systems.
Our sources also mentioned other crypto developments, like Dogecoin's rally and the launch of a new global stablecoin. What's the significance of those?
It shows how the crypto market is becoming more diverse, more mature. Bitcoin's still the big player, sure. But there's a growing interest in alternative cryptocurrencies and new uses for blockchain technology. Stablecoins, for instance, they aim to reduce the volatility that crypto is known for, potentially making them more usable for everyday transactions.
Sounds like the crypto world is moving at warp speed.
It really is. And for businesses, this presents both opportunities and challenges. Understanding blockchain's potential, maybe considering cryptocurrency as a payment option, and figuring out the regulations, these will become increasingly important.
So we've got global trade wars, a crypto boom, India rising on the world stage. What else should we add to this mix?
Well, let's not forget about the elephant in the room. Or rather, the lack of one.
What do you mean?
I'm talking about the elephant in the energy sector. Fossil fuels, we talked about that clean energy innovation, turning agricultural waste into fuel. But there wasn't much about traditional oil and gas in your sources.
That's true. It's almost like they've been overshadowed by all the other news. But does that mean they're irrelevant now?
Not necessarily, but it does suggest a shift in focus. Investors and businesses, they're increasingly looking at cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. And that projected growth of India's petrochemical sector, that's interesting in this context.
Because petrochemicals are used in so many products, right? Plastics, fertilizers. That demand's not going away anytime soon.
Exactly. The demand is still there. But the question is, how will the industry adapt to the pressure to be more environmentally friendly?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And one that every industry is going to have to face at some point.
Absolutely. Sustainability, it's not just a trendy word anymore. It's essential for business.
It feels like we're at the beginning of a major transformation, not just in business, but in how we think about energy resources, our planet.
I agree. And the decisions we make now, they'll shape the future.
So, for someone trying to stay ahead of the curve, what does all this mean?
Stay informed, be adaptable, embrace new ideas. The business world's constantly changing, and those who can anticipate and adapt to change will be the winners.
Sounds like a pretty exciting time to be in business, even with all the challenges.
It certainly is. There are so many opportunities for innovation, for disruption, for growth.
Speaking of growth, let's bring it back to India for a moment. We talked about those projections for the petrochemical sector. What about other industries? Any other bright spots?
Well, the fact that Skoda's CEO picked India as a key growth market, that's significant. It shows that global companies see India's potential, both as a manufacturing hub and a consumer market.
So for someone looking to invest, India is the place to be.
It's definitely worth considering. India's got a young population, a growing middle class, and the government's focused on economic growth. All of that creates a good environment for businesses.
It's not all smooth sailing, though, right? What are some of the challenges businesses face in India?
Well, every market has challenges, of course. India's infrastructure, bureaucracy, regulations, those can be obstacles for some businesses. But the government is working on these issues, trying to make it easier to do business there.
So it's a mixed bag. But overall, the future looks bright for India.
I think so. India has enormous potential, and it's ready to play a bigger role in the global economy.
That's good to hear. But let's not forget about education. That news about the CBSE cracking down on dummy schools, that was a bit of a reality check.
It does highlight how important it is to invest in good education, to create opportunities for everyone. India's future success hinges on having a skilled, educated workforce.
Absolutely. Education is the foundation for any economy to thrive. And we've covered a lot today. Global trade wars, cryptocurrency, clean energy, India's rise, a whirlwind tour of the business world.
It's clear we're living in a time of immense change, but also immense opportunity.
And as we navigate this new landscape, staying informed, adapting, and never stopping learning, those are crucial.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 2. But don't go anywhere yet. We'll wrap things up and leave you with some final thoughts in part 3. And we're back for the final part of the deep dive. We've been through a lot in this episode, from election surprises to a Bitcoin surge and India's growing economic power. Plus, those innovations in clean energy really makes you think. It's been a wild ride through business and global trends, that's for sure. So for this last part, let's zoom out a bit. What insights can we take away from all of this to navigate this complex world?
It's been quite the journey, yeah. From a political earthquake in the U.S. to a Bitcoin bonanza, and exploring India's journey to becoming, well, a global economic force.
And that idea of turning agricultural waste into shipping fuel? I mean, even with all the uncertainty, there's still room for, optimism and creativity.
Absolutely. And you know what's really interesting? All these trends, they seem separate at first, but they're all connected. It's all part of this bigger story about global shifts in power, technology, and how we think about sustainability.
So how can we use this understanding to make better decisions, whether we're investors, entrepreneurs, or just regular people trying to make sense of the world?
Well, I think the first step is realizing that the old rules, they don't really apply anymore. This world's changing so fast, we can't rely on traditional ways of doing business or investing.
So adaptability is key.
More important than ever, it's about being open to new ideas, being willing to innovate, to learn and grow constantly. The ability to change and adapt to, well, surprises, that's going to be a huge advantage in the coming years.
Okay, let's get practical for a second. What are some specific things people can do to stay ahead of the curve?
First and foremost, stay informed, read a lot, listen to different viewpoints, and don't be afraid to question what you think you know.
Shows like The Deep Dive are a good place to start, right?
Oh, of course. But there's so much out there. Podcasts, articles, books, industry events. The key is to actively seek out information.
Makes sense. What else?
Think critically about how these global trends impact your specific industry or, what you're interested in. Don't just absorb information passively. Analyze it, connect the dots, and form your own opinions.
Turn that knowledge into action, basically.
Exactly.
Fair
And
enough.
lastly, don't be afraid to experiment. The business world is dynamic, and the only way to know what works is to try new things, learn from mistakes, and keep improving.
Kind of like that saying, the only constant is change.
Exactly. The more comfortable we are with change, the better we'll be at thriving in this new world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, one last thought for our listeners to consider. With all this change and uncertainty around us, what are you most optimistic about?
That's a great question. For me, it's that amazing human ability to innovate and be resilient. Even with all the challenges, we keep finding solutions, pushing boundaries, striving for a better future. Whether it's developing clean energy solutions or adjusting to shifts in global trade, there's this incredible spirit of ingenuity and determination.
That's a hopeful way to end things. It reminds us that even when things are uncertain, we have the power to shape our own future.
Absolutely. So let's face those challenges head on, grab the opportunities, and keep exploring this ever-changing world of business.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed the journey and, more importantly, that you've gained some valuable insights you can use in your own work and life.
Remember, knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.